All right, guys, we just finished calling all the birds in. As you can see, I'm getting on the dark system. We had one last troublemaker that was inside the second round in the settling cage that just wouldn't go in, and he's been doing this the last few times, and he's old enough to know better. So this time I didn't shoo him in. I didn't force him to go in. I left him out. I made sure all the birds had enough feed in them, and then I removed the rest of the feed. So now when he goes in, there's nothing left for him. And that might sound cruel, guys, but trust me, if you develop this bad behavior, he's going to do this all the time, and he'll bring other birds along with him. If I let him out, and I always let them out hungry, and if I end up having a hawk attack or something of that nature, I can call the birds right in and eliminate any further losses. With a bird like that, with that sort of behavior, that learned behavior, trust me, he'll stay out much longer, because it's what they learned to do. They're better off learning the hard way, unfortunately. And in this case, he'll go to sleep hungry tonight, and I'm willing to bet he'll be the first one in tomorrow. If not, guess what? He'll go hungry again until he learns that when I start calling, that's when it's feed time, and that's the only time he's going to eat. But that's not what the video is about, guys. I'm sure you guys know enough about that. I just want to give you guys a quick update on the 3 eggs. Unfortunately, I removed 1 egg and I left 2. Out of the 3 eggs, 1 was pretty stained. I'm thinking it was laid or hatched. Jeez, I'm thinking it was laid a few days earlier than the other 2, because it was pretty, like I said, it was pretty stained, covered in droppings from the youngsters stepping all over it. And unfortunately, what ended up happening, the youngsters I couldn't remove quite yet. They weren't quite ready to wean, and they eventually just kicked the eggs out, and I lost those 2. But I did move the 3rd egg. I found a nest which ended up being gingerbread man's, and I took a guess. I didn't know exactly when they were laid, because I don't remember when that first egg was laid in the 3 egg group. So I went ahead and moved them down, and luckily enough, they hatched within a day of each other. I made a point to remember which one's which. You guys can see I got 2 youngsters here. The one with the darker beak is the mystery egg, the 3rd egg. The one with the light beak is off a gingerbread man, probably a red grizzle. I'm not sure what that one's going to be, but it's going to be dark. Probably a blue check. That's kind of what I'm expecting. So, not the odds I wanted, and definitely not the way I wanted it to work. I really wanted those 2 eggs to hatch before that one. But just how it goes sometimes, guys. The one you don't expect is the one that hatches. Could be a good bird. Maybe in 5, 6, 7, 8 months, we'll be talking about the next race winner that happened to be a 3rd egg and blah, blah, blah. But, that's a fun story for another time. One thing I wanted to address, and I'm hoping to address it the right way in this video, and I keep getting the same question. Apart from do I sell pigeons, the very next question I get is how old do I race my youngsters? Or how old before I can train them? Or how young do I train them? And it seems to be the same general question, just phrased differently. And it's hard for me to answer that question because I don't really understand what the answer should be, I should say. And I think the only real way to answer it is to tell you guys how I do things. And I don't necessarily pick a age for a bird to race. What I do pick is a stopping point of when I stop breeding. And for me, it's the first week of May. Not necessarily May 1st, but that first week of May, I don't want any more youngsters from my birds. Now, with that being said, that does not mean that I stop breeding in May. That means I don't want anything else after the first week of May. When I stop breeding is roughly 45 days before the first weekend in May. Now let me explain, because you guys might be losing some of you guys here. It takes 18 days roughly to hatch an egg, and then I wean around 23 to 25 days. So that's roughly about 45 days before I can move the bird from egg into the settling cage. Roughly 45 days. Now, if I stop breeding in May, 45 days after that, I'll be moving babies over in the middle of July, and I don't want that. So now I have to specifically stop breeding sometime 45 days before the 1st of May, which ends up being end of March, maybe the last week in March, or maybe the first week in April, depending on when the eggs were laid, and vice versa. If I end up having youngsters, so cut them off 45 days before you plan to stop breeding youngsters. So what do? I go in, I make a note on which ones are on eggs, which ones are raising babies, and I make sure I put a mark on that nest that if they end up laying any more eggs from now until then, I eliminate the eggs and I put dummy eggs under them, or whatever the case is, and I keep them from breeding. Now, I will separate the sexes come May 1st, because at that point, I don't want anything else, or I shouldn't say May 1st, but that first week in May. Whatever's not on babies or finishing raising babies, I'll separate hens in the hens coop, cocks in the cock section, and then that's it. I'm completely done breeding that first weekend in May. Again, if they're raising a set of youngsters for a few more days, not the end of the world, but that's it. So count down. Now, what does that give me? Let's see. If we stop breeding in May, or let's say I stop adding babies in May, by the time I start racing in August, we're talking 4-month-old youngsters. Is that the perfect number? I'm not saying that it is, guys. I'm just saying that that's what I do. I know some guys that breed much later and they'll race babies at 3 months old, 2.5 months old, whatever the case is. But in my personal opinion, I've never found a third-round youngster bred that late to do exceptionally well as a young bird. It'll score, it'll come in, it'll definitely find its way home. But at the end of the season, because I can only keep so many, I never end up going for those third-round youngsters. Those are the birds I usually hand out and I keep out of the best stuff, the first and second round youngsters. So for me to extend the breeding season another month simply makes no sense. But again, that's me, guys. That's not saying that that's the magic number. If you want to breed later, breed later. And for some guys, the racing season starts much later, in October, September, whatever the case is. Mine starts in August. So I don't want any youngsters after the first week of May. That's pretty much it. After that, if there's any in there, I don't necessarily kill them, guys. I don't want you guys to think I'm just in there ripping heads. I'll probably raise those babies and send them out or give them out as, whatever, as gifts or whatever off some of my top birds. But count back from the day you want to stop breeding completely, 45 days. And that's just a rough number. If you wean later, add a few more days. If you wean younger at 23 days, we'll cut them off at 40 days, whatever the case is. What I'm trying to say is pick a stopping point and count back from that stopping point when the very last egg needs to be laid. So for me, it's the first week of May. I want no eggs after the last week of March. Hope that makes sense, guys. Hope that answers a few questions, because this seems to be the second most asked question, apart from do I sell pigeons, is how old do the birds need to be, or how young are they when I race them, or basically what's the age of the birds that I race is the general question, just phrased differently. Hope that answers it, guys. We'll see you on the next one.